Hey gang, so in today's episode we are going to be, hang on, that's better. So in today's episode we are going to be making some fish out of several different materials. We're going to be using needlefelt, wool and foam clay, and then at the end we're going to meet up and see which was the most successful. So let's get crafting. So I got my felting pad, and then I got a needle felting needle, and then just some felting wool. I've got some pink and some black, so I thought they contrasted quite well. I took a lump of this pink wool and then just rolled that into a rough oval shape for the body of the fish, and then used the needle just to sort of stab that into a rough shape. Just kept sort of turning it inwards until it was a nice smooth shape. I'm mainly stabbing with the needle on one side so that the stab marks are on one side and one side's left smooth. I then made the tail, which was slightly more difficult, so I made a sort of triangular shape with the needle felt and then just tried to adhere that to the body of the fish. I ended up having to wind some extra felt around this tail because it looked a bit lacklustre. But in the end I had something that I think looked a bit like a fish, but I wanted to jazz it up some more. I then took a small amount of the black wool and then just sort of wound that around into like little strips and needle felted that together, and then I've put those little stripes on the fish. I don't need to see what the back of this fish looks like for the purposes I'm using it for, so I've just sort of roughly tacked it to the back of the fish, but you could wind the stripe the whole way around if you wanted to. Then it was time to add some eyes. No problem, because I have a box full of eyes. Fear not, they are crafting eyes, nothing suspicious going on. I think they're mainly for sort of teddy bears and like knitted and crocheted items, but these sort of work well for quite a lot of other crafting purposes. I picked the smallest eye here because it's quite a small fish, and then used the needle just to sort of bore a hole into the fish for the eyeball. I then realised that the prong on the back of the eyeball was a bit long. I then just sort of nibbed a bit off the end of that so it would fit in the eye socket. Added a dab of PVA glue and then stuck the eye in there and left it to set. So I had some jazzy coloured foam clay left over from another project. I wanted to make something fun and make use of all these colours, so I decided to make a rainbow fish. So I basically just took small balls of each of these colours, or at least the ones that were appropriate for a rainbow. I then tried to mould them into something vaguely fish shaped, but it was a bit of a going on. I just sort of moulded it into a flat shape and then tried to cut it into a fish shape with a pen knife. The problem is that I don't know if it's just me and it's user error, but I find that foam clay is extremely difficult to use, and every time I use it I forget that it sticks to wood just so much. It has no interest in getting away from the wood once it gets there. It's just like a sort of mega strong magnet with some metal. It just has no interest in getting away from it. So I did end up in a bit of a mess and having to try and like shape this back into a fish shape. And then it ended up a bit flat because I'd been playing around with it, and so I tried to add some more foam clay to make it look a bit more of a chunky fish, layering up those colours on top of them, and I think it looked a little bit better, but I mean it was still a bit of a mess, to be honest. I don't really have a lot of positive things to say about this fish, to be honest. But I left that to dry, and I mean it didn't look any worse, so you know there's that. And then I just stuck a eyeball on it. This time I'm using googly eyes. And I just used a dab of PVA glue and then stuck the eye right on there, and I mean it does look a little bit more lifelike with the eye, but yes, certainly not ideal. So I did have another go with the foam clay. I thought I'd just try doing the body with one main colour, try to make this a little bit easier for myself. So I made a sort of rough oval shape for the body and then a sort of triangle type shape for the tail, and then just sort of tried to form them together. I did end up with a little bit of a mess in the in-between section, so I thought, we'll add some stripes, sort that problem right out. So I took a contrasting colour of the foam clay and rolled that into sort of long sausage shapes, and then wrapped that around the body of the fish to make these stripes, making sure of course to add a stripe on that intersection between the body and the tail just to cover up that little bit of mess there. As with the needle felted one, I'm not going the full way around the body with the stripes because I don't need them at the back, but you could do that if you wanted to. And then again, I've put a little googly eye on here with some glue, and I think this was definitely a more accomplished foam clay fish. Then it was time to get making the wood fish. I just drew the fish out roughly on a piece of leftover wood I had. So I put that wood in a vise just to stop it rocking about, although as you can see it was still moving quite a lot, as was the rest of me. Don't really know what I'm doing when it comes to woodwork. I did try using 2 different saws and eventually did manage to get this fish carved out of this piece of wood. You will be happy to know that I do still have all of my fingers. I'm just going to try and sand the living daylights out of this fish and try and make it look a little less angular. Then I got to sanding and oh my gosh, this was such an angular fish, it took so long, but eventually I had something that looked vaguely fish-like. I popped that on a block of wood just so I wasn't painting the table, and I got some wood primer out just in a nice white base coat and then painted that fish up. I did kind of forget my own rules and somehow painted the entire fish. I managed to stick this to the block of wood with the paint, which was probably not a good idea, but it's fine. I managed to get it off in the end after prying it off with a screwdriver. Once that white base coat had dried, I added some red acrylic paint. I'm not really sure why I squirted it onto the fish and not onto the wood, but hey, it worked in the end, so I just smoothed that paint all over the fish. I've done the sides, I haven't done the back this time, so it didn't end up sticking to everything, which is great. I did end up doing a second coat of this acrylic just to give a more kind of total coverage look. And then I went in with some white paint to add some stripes. I feel we've come this far with the stripes, we may as well just keep going with the same theme. So I added some white stripes because I felt this contrasted well with the red, and I've continued those down the side of the body as well, but again, not gone on the back. You could do, but I would advise to wait until one side's dried and then do the back, because yeah, you don't want to make the same mistake I did and end up having to try and pry this off the wood and quite frankly make quite a lot of mess. And again, why not get the googly eyes out, guys? Why not jazz up your life with some googly eyes? I stuck on a googly eye with some PVA glue. And now it's time for the reveal. So let's just take a closer look at these fish and look at the pros and cons of each one. I'm going to start with the needle felted one. Now, I think that this is quite an easy one to make. I've used needle felt before, mainly from needle felting sets. This is my first time trying to make something just sort of freestyle with the needle felt, but I didn't find it super difficult to do. It also doesn't really make a lot of mess. There's not really any paint or anything like that involved, and there's no sort of cleanup involved in it, unless of course you stab yourself with a needle, in which case quite a mess. I would say on that front probably not the best option to use if you're trying to do some crafting with children, because you will inevitably stab yourself at some point when you're needle felting. I didn't actually manage to stab myself with this one, but I have done it in the past. It's quite unpleasant, but all in all I think this was quite cute. I think it worked quite well. I like the colours and I think it was quite cheap and easy to make, but as I say, probably not the best one if you're trying to do some crafting with children. The foam clay, I don't have a lot of good things to say about the foam clay. I just as I said, I just really don't get along with it. I don't know if it's me or if it's if it's just an issue with foam play, but I find it really difficult to work with. I think the colours are really fun and vibrant, so I think certainly like kids would love playing with it, and you don't need like gloves or anything. Some clays I've used, like for instance epoxy clay, you need to use gloves and it's a little bit of a faff, and obviously you don't want like children for instance like getting it on the skin and getting like reactions or something. But so in that respect it's quite good and user friendly, but I find it quite difficult to shape. Like I think they're like recognisable as fish and they're quite jazzy colours, but they just don't look really great. I just don't really quite know how to explain it, but they just look a bit naff. Then we have the wooden option. Now when I first made this I really wasn't sure about the angular nature of this fish, but then I thought, much like humans and other animals, fish come in all shapes and sizes, don't they? Some of them are more angular, so I think it's fine. I think obviously because I've paid this, I've been able to use whatever colours I wanted, so I've gone with some nice jazzy colours. I really like the contrast of these colours and I think it looks really cute. Obviously one con would be with this, if you were trying to do this yourself at home, not everyone's going to have access to like a saw and a vise and wood. I just had this like hanging about because we do quite a lot of crafting at our house, and obviously if you're trying to do this with children you won't really want them using a saw or something. You could maybe just cut out the fish and get the children to like paint them or something if you're trying to do an activity with children. But yeah, fine for grown-ups as long as you've access to the equipment. Now I would say that while this is a bit more difficult for people to make, I think this probably is my favourite one. I just really like the vibrancy of the colours and it's quite sturdy as well, which is helpful because I'm going to be using this in an animation. So if you're new to my channel, I do little animations in my free time, and 2 years ago I made a little animation called Mermaid Mayhem with Daphne the mermaid and her best friend Roxy, which is, as you can probably see from this, not a sophisticated puppet. It is a rock that I've stuck googly eyes to. Sometimes it doesn't need to be sophisticated, does it, guys? Just, we all can understand this is a rock with eyes. So that animation is going to be coming back for at least one more episode with the addition of Brock the fish. That video will be dropping in 2 weeks, so do make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that and all of my other creations. And I will see you all again really soon. Bye!